I was 19 when we had to move to Nashville because my older sister Emma had started college, and Mom was completely over the pastures and wanted us girls to finally get some real-life experience. A friend of hers hooked me up with the 7-Eleven graveyard shift, which ended up being my first city job ever. Honestly, those hours kicked my butt every single night. Being up all night, alone in that massive store, was still something I was trying to get used to. It got so dead quiet some nights that I swear I'd be begging for a customer to walk in. It was Monday, about 1 in the morning, and the place was so dead quiet you could hear a pin drop. I was just leaning against the counter, messing around on my phone, when the door chime went off, and this guy walked in. I couldn't tell how old he was. The man wore a tattered hat paired with an old brown suit. He was also completely drenched from head to toe. Water was just pouring off his hair and his clothes, making little puddles on the floor right where he was standing. I blinked. It hadn't rained that night. The weather was warm and dry, but this man looked like he'd just climbed out of a lake. I stared at him and tried to figure out where all the water was coming from. He walked straight to the counter. Without even looking around or browsing, he pointed at the chewing gum packet.
This one?
I confirmed, holding up the pack. When he nodded, I rang up.
That'll be $1.49.
I said, my voice sounding a little too loud in the quiet store. He dropped a crumpled single on the counter and still didn't say a word. I felt a bit uneasy as I slowly picked it up. To my shock, it was totally dry. I stared at the bill, then at him, waiting for an explanation, but he only blinked and stared. I cleared my throat and nodded.
Do you need anything else?
He didn't respond and kept staring at me. His eyes were empty and cold and made my skin crawl. Suddenly, he turned and walked out, leaving wet footprints across the floor all the way to the door. I watched him through the window. He stood under a flickering streetlight just outside and stared at the pack of gum in his hand.
Sir, you forgot your change.
He didn't react or turn around. He only kept staring at the gum. Something told me to stay inside and just to let him be, but I felt bad about the change, thinking maybe it was all he had. So I walked outside.
Sir, your change.
He was maybe 10 feet away, still standing under that busted-up light, staring at the gum. Out of nowhere, he ripped the pack open, took out every single piece of gum, and shoved the whole mess into his mouth. I stopped dead in my tracks. My heart started hammering. I watched him slowly chew for a second before he started going faster and more violently until he started gagging and choking. Tears welled up in his eyes and his throat started twitching. Blood started pouring out of his mouth, mixed with spit. You could literally see the shape of the gum packet stuck in his throat, completely blocking his windpipe. He was choking to death right in front of me. I might have screamed or something, because he looked right at me and grinned. My whole body started shaking as I watched him. He opened his mouth wide, pushed his fingers down his throat, and started to try and pull the packet out. Blood gushed everywhere, down his chin and his shirt and pooling on the ground. He was making these wet, gurgling sounds, yet wouldn't stop trying to pull it out, or smiling. I opened my mouth to scream, but couldn't. I had started sobbing. Finally, I snapped out of it and ran back inside. I locked the doors and called 911.
There's a man outside choking. He's bleeding. Please hurry.
I saw him through the window. Even though he had crumpled right under that streetlight, he was still trying to get that gum out, grinning the whole time. His body was shaking all over, like he was having a fit. When the cops finally got there, he was completely still. The paramedics tried to help him, but it was too late. He was dead. They pulled the gum packet out of his throat, and he was covered in blood. The police asked me questions, what happened and what I saw. I told them everything I could. They exchanged looks and said he was probably a hobo on drugs, that I shouldn't blame myself when there was nothing I could have done. But I can't shake the image of his smile and how he looked right at me while all that blood was pouring out. He didn't look like he was high. He was totally calm, like he was doing exactly what he wanted. And I can't forget the water either. Where the hell did it all come from? They never figured it out or found a source. I quit that job 2 weeks later. I told Mom I couldn't do it. I couldn't be alone in that store at night or stand near that streetlight or sell gum without seeing his face. She understood and helped me find a job at a library not far from our home. I'm starting my post-graduation this year, but I still can't be alone after dark or handle the quiet or stop thinking about it. And I keep wondering if he came there on purpose, and if he knew what he was going to do, and if he chose me to witness it. And I'll never know why. I'd only been working the graveyard shift at the 7-Eleven on the edge of town for about 6 months. I was 22, studying for my engineering degree, so the late hours were all I could swing around my labs. David, the manager, was a friend of my cousin's and helped me get the gig when I told him I needed the money to stay afloat. I was seriously thankful. It was usually dead quiet, with only a few people for gas or cigarettes. I was halfway through my shift that Tuesday night. The clock on the wall said it was probably around 2 in the morning. The store was totally dead, and I was just refilling the chips rack when the door chimed and a blonde woman walked in. When she first came in, I figured she was just a regular shopper. She looked maybe in her mid-30s, rocking some cool striped jeans and a leather jacket, but she didn't even look around before walking straight to the counter.
Do you have ice and bandages?
Yeah. I pointed her to where the first aid stuff was. She got bandages and gauze, then bought a bag of ice. The whole time she had this seriously strange smile, like it was frozen on her face and she couldn't take it off.
Thanks, sweetie. Just ignore me, okay? Whatever you see, just ignore it.
She giggled loudly, and it honestly gave me the creeps. But she took off before I could even ask her what that meant. I watched out the window as she walked over to a car by the gas pumps, opened the back door, and started looking after someone in the back seat. It was a kid, maybe 7 or 8, lying still. I kept watching. Something felt off. The woman was putting bandages on him and using the ice, but the kid wasn't moving at all. Suddenly, she looked up and made eye contact with me through the window. The grin on her face got wider. My stomach turned. Holding eye contact, she gathered the kid in her arms, opened the door, and came back in holding the kid. He was out cold, his head flopping back and his arms hanging limp.
We were in an accident. Can you watch him for a minute while I use the restroom and grab some food? I need to get him to the hospital, but I have to clean up first.
I looked between the kid and her. Yeah, sure. She put him on the floor by the counter and took off for the restroom. I stood there, staring at the kid. My eyes fell on her car. It looked as good as new. I mean, I really looked, and there wasn't a scratch, dent, or broken window. If they'd been in a wreck bad enough to knock a kid out, how was the car totally fine? And the woman didn't seem to be injured at all. Something was really wrong. The story didn't make sense. I stood there thinking and trying to figure out what to do. Right then, the kid groaned and moved a little. His eyes started to open slowly. He looked confused and scared. I knelt beside him and whispered, "Hey, don't worry. Your mom's gonna take you to the hospital. Can you tell me what happened in the accident?" The kid stared at me, wide-eyed, his lips trembling as he whispered, She's not my mom." A shiver went down my spine. I got up, grabbed my phone, and dialed 911. I told them the whole story. They said they were sending cops over. But I knew she'd come out way before the officers showed up, so I walked over to the bathroom. The woman was still inside, and I could hear the water running. I quietly locked the door from the outside using my work keys. Moments later, loud banging echoed through the store. She was pounding on the door and screaming.
Let me out! I need to take my son to the hospital! What are you doing?
I didn't answer. I stayed near the kid, kept him calm, and told him help was coming. The banging got louder and more frantic.
Open this door right now! He needs a doctor!
She kept screaming and threatening to sue me and saying I was going to be responsible if her son died, but I didn't unlock it and only waited. Soon enough, the sirens got closer. The banging suddenly stopped, and everything went quiet. Police arrived within minutes. I unlocked the bathroom and they pulled her out. She was crying and screaming that I'd locked her in, that her son needed help, and that I was insane. But the officers looked at the kid and asked him questions. He told them she wasn't his mom and that she'd taken him from the park. He said she had given him something to drink that made him sleepy. The woman's story fell apart completely. They arrested her right there. When they put her in handcuffs, she was still screaming and insisting the kid was hers, but he wasn't. They found drugs in her purse and matched the ones they found in the kid's body. The kid's parents came to the station later that night. They'd reported him missing hours earlier. He'd been playing at a park and vanished. They were crying, thanking me over and over, saying I was a hero. I didn't feel like a hero. I felt sick, because I couldn't stop thinking about the whole episode. I'll be graduating by the end of this year. I still work at that 7-Eleven and do graveyard shifts, but I watch people more closely now, ensuring nothing feels out of place in their stories. That night taught me that evil doesn't always look like evil. Sometimes it looks like a normal woman buying bandages, and sometimes the only thing standing between a child and a nightmare is whether or not you pay attention. My name's Ethan Cole. I used to work the graveyard shift at a 7-Eleven in Phoenix, Arizona, and I absolutely hated every second of it. But it paid the bills. Well, I was at community college, so I figured I'd stick it out a little longer. Anyway, most nights were dead quiet, with only the buzzing lights, the hum of the coolers, and empty aisles. Once in a while, a drunk dude swung by for a bag of chips. It was a Friday night. The shift was going per usual. I was behind the counter, watching The Office reruns. It was 2:13 in the morning. I know because I remember checking my phone right before the bell above the door jingled twice. Two guys walked in separately, but you could instantly feel the tension between them. Something was up with them. The first dude was all twitchy, super skinny, and kept looking over his shoulder like someone was following him. The second guy was tall, with a long face and dead calm. He grabbed a glass bottle of soda out of the cooler and stood there, watching the first guy through the glass door, who kept going from aisle to aisle. I ignored them and kept watching the episode, till both of them showed up at the register at the same exact time, side by side. But instead of paying up and walking away like normal shoppers, they stared down at each other and started sneering. "You've got nerve showing up here, Josh." Josh smirked. "You still owe me, Max." I stepped back. This wasn't my business, and I didn't want any part of it. They started taunting each other. The argument escalated quickly with louder voices. Max was backing away with his hands up defensively. "I told you I'd get you the money. Just give me more time." Josh wasn't listening or interested in talking. He grabbed the soda bottle he'd been holding and smashed it on the edge of the counter. Glass exploded everywhere. I flinched and looked down to avoid the shards. When I looked back up, the calm man had a knife out. My heart started pounding. I was literally frozen on the spot. The big guy gripped the knife and shoved it between the skinny dude's ribs. The attack was brutal, without shouting or chaos. He stabbed the skinny guy over and over until he collapsed against a display rack with bags of chips falling around him. Blood was soaking through his shirt and spreading fast. The attacker barely reacted. He simply wiped the blade on his sleeve. He looked me dead in the eye and said, "You didn't see anything." His voice was steady and matter-of-fact. That was enough for me. Without wasting another second, I slammed the silent alarm button under the counter and bolted through the back exit into the alley. I didn't look back or stop until I reached the police station 6 blocks away and burst inside, gasping. I couldn't catch my breath or form words. I kept pointing back toward the store. Officers rushed to get details. I told them everything between gasps. They grabbed their gear and told me to get in the patrol car. We drove back to the store with lights flashing and sirens blaring. My hands were shaking, and I couldn't stop them. Inside, the scene wasn't clean. The injured man was still lying there, lying near the aisle in a pool of his own blood. He was barely conscious. Paramedics arrived fast, loaded him onto a stretcher, and started working on him immediately. The store was a mess, with broken glass, knocked over displays, and blood smeared across the floor. But the attacker had vanished. Officers searched the entire building, the alley, and the surrounding streets, but there were no traces of him. They pulled the security footage and watched it back. Everything was there. The two men entering, the argument, and the bottle breaking. But right at the moment of the stabbing, the footage cut out and went black, as if someone had meddled with it. When it came back on seconds later, the attacker was already leaving through the back door. I spent hours at the police station under harsh fluorescent lights with endless questions, replaying every second of what I saw and describing the attacker. They wrote everything down, took my statement, and told me I'd done the right thing by running and calling for help. If I had played the hero, I might have ended up in the pool of my own blood too. But it didn't feel right. It felt like I'd abandoned someone when I could have done much more. The injured man survived, barely. He was in the hospital for weeks, lost a lot of blood, and needed surgery. The police interviewed him, but he wouldn't talk or identify the attacker or press charges. He said it was a personal matter and that he didn't want to get involved. The case went nowhere. They never caught the attacker or even got close. I quit that job immediately and never went back to collect my final check. They mailed it to me. I graduated last year and got a proper office job. It's boring and safe, but I'm fine with that. Because that night taught me that violence doesn't always announce itself. Sometimes it just walks in quietly, buys a soda, and waits for the right moment before it erupts in seconds. Even though I hate to admit it, I was lucky that I got to live to tell the story. Because had he known I'd seen what he told me not to, he would have told my story way differently.